All right. Good afternoon and welcome. And Justice for All, a restorative plan for our communities. What a relevant theme and topic. And I'm excited about having dialogue. And I'm hoping today will just really be some free dialogue around best practices and supportive strategies that will help our returning citizens. Today, Prestige will present a symposium that explores solutions that we can implement in our communities that will support improved outcomes and offer a pathway for many in the justice-involved community to the middle class, where they have none to little that has existed before. We have speakers today from nonprofit sector, peer support initiatives, behavioral health treatment providers, academia, and community stakeholders who will speak on these issues. These issues include the importance of peer certification, forensic assertive community treatment, transitional housing supports, and the Sequential Intercept Model. This is such an important symposium and relevant to anyone who works with justice-involved individuals. In my welcome, I had thought to present some data, and I decided not to give you the data that's available for returning citizens. Significant data, remarkable data. And we know all the challenges inherent in being with under the supervision of probation, parole, pretrial services. But I thought to really adequately express some of the challenges, I would just share with you an informal experience I had, or professional experience I had maybe 20 years ago, that really highlights some of the challenges that are not so obvious with this profile of returning citizen. At that time, this was 1995, I was director of a very large outpatient chemical dependency program. And we had multiple contracts with criminal justice, Bureau of Prisons, Federal Probation, DC, Federal Probation, Maryland, Virginia. And in particular, we had a contract with Federal Bureau of Prisons. And as you know, DC inmates don't do their time in DC, one of the complications of reentry that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But in this professional capacity, I would do orientation to returning citizens, those who just came home, who were placed into the halfway house, and were mandated to begin outpatient drug treatment services. And they had about a week to report to our facility. And the challenge with this was that they failed to report. They could be suspect to immediate return to Bureau of Prisons because they were out early, on early release. And I'll never forget this evening, I had about 23 participants I was doing orientation for and bringing them into the program. And about 20 minutes into the orientation, we locked the front door, as we customarily did. And at some point during my presentation, there was a loud bang and a lot of commotion out in the common area. Heard some profanity, heard some screaming. And my staff came in and shared with me that there was a returning citizen who was very troubled, very animated, very oppositional, very agitated, who was demanding to get into this orientation. And so I broke my own rules. I was the director of the program, and I allowed the person to come in. And what he shared with me was so profound and long-standing, I wanted to share it with you. He came in, remember, this is 1995, and he came in, he was tearful, he was exaggerated, he was a hypervigilant, he was really passionate about requesting to be led into the orientation center. So I asked him in front of his peers, why should I let you in? You're late, you know the rules of Bureau of Prisons, you know the rules of the program. Why should I allow you to come in? And he said this to me, Mr. Wells, please allow me to come in. I'm just coming home from a 30-year bid. But just that was enough to get my interest. 30 years incarcerated, and you're just coming home. He then went on to say, Mr. Wells, I'm telling you the truth. I did my best to get here on time, but I just couldn't pull it off. I said, oh, well, what was the barrier? And he said, Mr. Wells, I'm a native Washingtonian. And I tell you that when I was arrested and convicted and sent to Bureau of Prisons, the metro line didn't exist. There was no metro. Mr. Wells, I could not figure out how to get to this address. Our location was in Foggy Bottom in Northwest Washington, DC. And he could not navigate this new atmosphere, this new climate, this new city, enough to make it to our program on time. That really stuck with me so many years later, that how the world had changed for him during 30 years of incarceration, and that in a community that he was born and raised, he couldn't even figure out the Metro's transit system to get to the facility to avoid being in violation with a Bureau of Prisons condition. We later learned that he had been home a week, and within that week he had relapsed, so he was actively using. We later also discovered he had co-occurring emotional distress, so his relapse activated his psychotic processes. And we also learned that he had a literacy problem, and even though he was trying to navigate the locale, he couldn't even read the signs to determine to go left, to go right, to go up, or go down. And so today, we're going to talk about some of these barriers that he presented with so naturally that you couldn't see upon presentation. And if you could, someone could pull up the slide for me real quick. I want to share with you the 15 reentry or reintegration barriers that I think are significant. And we're going to talk a lot about today. Our panelists will kind of tap into these reintegration barriers. As Deputy Director of the Reentry and Sanction Center, which is at that time was a high risk, was designed for high risk offenders and was a treatment readiness assessment center. It was our clinical charge to determine what was the barrier to reentry and what was causing these men and women to return back to prison within sometimes a year of return to the community. And we did a lot of research, and through our psychological testing and other administration of assessment tools, we came to this list of reintegration barriers. And you're familiar with some of these barriers, but we fully understood the impact these barriers had on not only successful reintegration, but the person's ability to remain home in a viable contributor to our community. Let's just review the list very quickly. We know psychological disorders can be a barrier. Untreated, undiagnosed, undertreated mental health is obviously a barrier with this population. Substance abuse, we know untreated, causes significant problems for returning citizens. So we need to make sure those services are in place. Cognitive impairments. This reminds me of a client who, well, we know this, that sometimes a client will meet with the probation officer the first time, go over the conditions of probation, read the conditions of probation, sign off on the condition of probations, and affirm that they understand them, to only walk out of the office not knowing how to execute and not really fully understanding. They're just in agreement, but don't fully understand, how do I comply with all of these conditions? How do I operationalize them? And how do I navigate life to make sure that I'm in compliance in all of them? Criminogenic factors. We know that some folks have a profile that's really, there's some criminogenic factors that have to be understood and resolved. Post-incarceration syndrome, protracted withdrawal, physical illness. We know that our clients, particularly the older clients in this population, are coming home with a lot of medical distress. And then these environmental concerns really are barriers. Financial readiness, support systems or lack thereof, and the big one is housing. So I'm hoping today that our panelists will kind of talk about practices and strategies and ideas that will target some of these reintegration barriers, so that we can help our returning citizens be successful as they return home and hopefully stay home. So we welcome you, Prestige welcomes you, and we hope to have a very engageful and productive session. Thank you. Mr. Barnett, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Wells is a serious asset to the services in the community, and we appreciate your presence here. For our first speaker, thank you for your welcome, Paul. For our first speaker, we wanted to bring on a certified peer who's actually doing some good work in the community. That he's gone, I can't say enough about this guy. Kevin Petty, at the tender age of, I'm going to read his bio, at the tender age of 8 years old, 1965, was introduced to heroin and other intoxicants, consequently causing over 38 years of incarceration and creating a barrier to his childhood dream to become a devoted R&B singer like his idol, Little Anthony of the Imperials. You're dating yourself. Since his parole in 2009, Kevin Petty established a community organization, the Amazing Gospel Souls, Inc., primarily made up of talented people with lived experiences and successful reentry themselves, dedicated to mentoring others and helping them navigate reentry in the district. In 2017, they established the Philemon Mission transitional facility from which to provide a platform to establish comprehensive reentry services for DC returning citizens in the District of Columbia, while also creating a training platform for aspiring peer specialists, mentors, case managers, and counselors with lived experiences to contribute to an underserved population in the underserved communities. Kevin Petty is a certified peer support specialist, a trained professional counselor, and case manager. The Philemon Mission is a transitional housing program in the district primarily operated and run by formerly incarcerated community organizers in collaboration with other community stakeholders. The program concept is designed to address critical issues to the poor and underserved population, with critical issues focusing on housing, workforce development, case management needs of those citizens, which include returning to the community from long periods of incarceration, and others. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Petty. We are happy to have you aboard as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barnett. And I want to thank Mr. Wells for such a great presentation. And I'm just happy to be here today, and where I can be of assistance in this situation. I think that the large part of give you an idea of the model that we thought was important at this particular stage, and it's more political than anything to solving the problem. We just thought in the beginning that, we looked around the District of Columbia and we looked at what the government thought reentry was, and it was completely backwards. And you can look at some of the things that Dr. Wells just said as he described the incident with the young man. There was really no understanding of what reentry should look like. And so what we decided to do is, those of us that sort of grew up in the system ourselves, but found a way to climb out of what we created for ourselves, and just create some kind of system where our brothers and sisters come through our system and find a way to be champions also. And so we formed the Amazing Gospel Souls Incorporated. And Amazing Gospel Souls Incorporated really started out as, as you heard in my bio, everybody that know me, most people know me from singing. They know that's been a part of my heart. And my days in Lawton, it was filled with mostly a lot of music, and then we transferred over to prison ministry. But we didn't know at that particular stage that, and that's where the name Amazing Gospel Souls came from. So we was a prison ministry down in there that was doing a lot of stuff. We even recorded an album down there in Lawton, and that was our dream. We had no idea that that concept can be an asset in the community the way it is now, and so or that we had anything to offer to it. So when we got out here, when I got out here, it was all about, well, let me ask the government what reentry should look like. Let me see where their resources were going. And alarming to me, there was very little resources going to reentry in the District of Columbia. And all those resources that was going to reentry in the District of Columbia, they were mostly created by people who with no experience on what reentry really looks like. And so I said, well, this is a place for us to get involved, But people I got a lot of friends that like-minded with me, did just as much time as I'd done, 30. And altogether, I did 38 years of my life inside of the penal system. I got a lot of friends like that are just as talented and thoughtful and can really, really contribute. And so how do I find a way to pull some of those folks together? And that's what we did. And we ended up getting the opportunity a few years ago to start the Philemon Mission transitional facility. Right? And that since then has been a great evolution, and it's growing every day. That we get an opportunity to effectuate some change in people's lives. But the advocacy part is still where we're at. I think the government has a lot of resources to put toward reentry. DC government has a $16.7 billion annual budget. I doubt if 10 million of that goes toward reentry. And yet DC had the highest incarceration rate in the world for the past 45 years. So and the closing of Lawton created other barriers where the community couldn't be involved as much as it should be. Family couldn't be involved as much as it should be. And so the government is sort of to expect the government to be able to create avenues out of that kind of conundrum is foolhardy on our part. That's something that we have to do in the community, all right? We have to build it. We have to show the government what it looks like. We have to build it ourselves. And that's what we're doing over here at the Philemon Mission. Did the bell mean I'm talking too much? And so in that instance, we created the Philemon Mission, and in it, it's just been a great blessing that we've been able to inspire so many folks that are coming out with those barriers, like Dr. Wells, so eloquently showed, and we're finding different ways to help them navigate through it, and in the process. But it all boils down to resources, right? How do you have the necessary resources to really help? And now, when we look at the pandemic has uncovered some other hidden problems that we're having in the poor and underserved communities, that we don't have access, period. So now it's really even bigger than reentry, right? It's about how do we have our whole community, our poor and underserved community, connected, right? Economic development, and understanding those things will help us to see the proper approach. For instance, let me get it. For instance, so we run into a lot of folks that have little small jobs. We have little small companies connected to us to have jobs and things at the same time. We have raising generations of young people who, when it comes to employment, they don't see it as a way out of anything. And so the first thing that they do is say, yeah, you got a job for me to do some construction? Yeah. And the first couple of paychecks represents my opportunity to go get me a pack and climb out. And so the job becomes less important. After about 2 paychecks, they're literally quitting and going to get a pack of something that they think they can climb out of. That's a mental thing that we have to deal with folks on that level. And so, and they don't see it the way maybe my generation or my father's generation seen having proper employment as a way of climbing out of poverty and things on that level. And so it's really not enough to just to, if you had every company in the world came here and said, we're going to drop jobs down on Ward 8, right? We would need a whole lot more to solve our employment problem, right? Because we got to deal with behavior problem, we got to deal with concept, we got to deal with vision and all those things. And those folks of us, because I was there once before myself, people like me who had no vision, you know, was living, and I thought my life was built around street life. I thought that's where my fortune in life is going to come from, with street life. You know, how I was able to climb out of there is what I look to do today, to teach other folks to climb out. And we got a great opportunity, especially with the peer support and forensic peer support. You know, I'm dismayed when I look back at how we took the lived experience out of the process when it comes to substance abuse and mental health, right? How we took the lived experience out of there and pushed it to a side, and somehow, my doctorate or my master's degree, my PhD or whatever the case it is, said to me that that's where the experience was at. And so we ended up years later, we're taking the lived experience out of the process, and we had a bunch of good-hearted and educated people who couldn't move the needle. And so we got to find a way to get the lived experience back in there, right? My Philemon Mission is exclusively made up of people with lived experience, and we're showing that these folks listen. Okay, we're mentoring, we're holding hands, we're walking folks through the process, and we're teaching as we go. And these past 3.5 to 4 years has been pretty awesome watching that concept. So, and hopefully we can get the government involved and put some more resources in that area. So I love being here today. I think this is a great topic. You know, how do we get the peer support specialists in the game and changing our community in some kind of way? I was dismayed to find out that, after the government gave us gave us opportunity to build Medicaid and things on that level, that someone dropped the ball, and we don't have those kind of certifications. Okay, I'm past my point, Will.
You're always on that, Kevin. Not a problem at all. And thank you for all the good work that you do in the community, especially with Gospel Souls and Philemon Mission. I am going to have to make an adjustment to our agenda. We are having some technical difficulties with getting our next speaker on. So I'm going to move forward to Dr. Hackett, Dr. Joseph Hackett. Dr. Joseph Hackett is a dynamic leader with over 20 years experience in the nonprofit and for-profit sector, building bridges across cultures. His cutting-edge servant leadership style has gained notoriety from the grassroots to the international level, from grassroots to the international level, strengthening diverse initiatives. His work has been recognized by the North Carolina Bar Journal, honored by Chamber of Commerce, and published in NADAC's Scholarly Journal. He is an expert in social entrepreneurship, community and economic development, and discovering purpose. As a lifelong learner, he was educated at the University of North Carolina in Asheville, University of Ghana, Lenoir Rhine University, Eli College and Seminary, and Duke University, where he was trained in nonprofit management. Dr. Hackett develops products, programs, and services that speak to the diversity of the human experience so that people have access to opportunities previously hidden from them. Life experience at recovery and reentry mixed with his professional success has afforded him to be a TEDx host, a speaker for South by Southwest, and a consultant to BMW executives. I know that's right. You can tell them executives I need one. Dr. Hackett is an advocate for the rights of recovering and returning citizens and was recently receiving an appointment to the Justice Resource Advisory Council alongside judges and lawyers to make system-level improvements to the justice system. He is a member of the Rotary Club and has a track record including public-private partnerships, small business incubation, federal, state, and regional partnerships, international NGOs, as well as grant writing and management. I have to tell you, I heard this guy speak for the first time a few months ago, and I was floored by his passion, his commitment, and he was just such a dynamic speaker. And I knew I had to have him part of this event. So without any further ado, I give you Dr. Joseph Hackett.
Hey, how's it going, Will?
I'm blessed, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, doing great. How's everybody else doing? Well, actually, they can't hear. I can't hear them, but they can hear me. This is such an honor. So glad that you allowed me to come. And you started reading. I was like, man, who did that? I think my secretary did well. But I'm glad to be here and glad to be talking about such an important topic. When we look at the convergence of what goes on in our industry, we cannot separate what goes on in our industry from what goes on in our life, because the economy, our neighborhoods, our environments, they're not static things. They're actually dynamic things. They're living, breathing, moving organisms in the same way that we are living, breathing, moving organisms. And in order to understand the changing terrain of our industry, the changing terrain of the services that we provide, we also have to accept the changing terrain of our human experience and the changing terrain of how we interact with each other. So when we look at what we are as peers, and I embrace this as a badge of honor, I have the lived experience of being born to a teenage mother. And then that mother was drug addicted to drugs and alcohol. And then because of the environment that I grew up in, and many of you may have a similar experience, in the Black neighborhood, I was too white sounding. And then I tested out of my school and went to what they call a gifted school. And then I was too Black for the gifted school. But I was the same person going from one neighborhood to the next, going from my neighborhood in North Philly was called 7th and Tioga. And so I was the same Black kid going from 7th and Tioga to the gifted school in Center City, Philadelphia, down with all the other folks. And so we have this dichotomy. What W.B. Du Bois referenced is this duality. I am as much this thing as I am that thing. And so when we struggle with issues of the soul, we bring that to our work, and we have to admit that the person that is suffering with mental illness, the person that is suffering with the disease of addiction, the person that is struggling with reentry, they are also a single person, and they're struggling with the labels that society put upon them compared to what they think of themselves. And without any support, it is very easy for a person's cognitive load to be so pressed upon that they accept the labels that society gives them and the subsequent behaviors. And in order for that person to make a hard right or a hard left, but to divert away from the stereotype, it takes support, and it takes support from someone who has been there and done that. So when I left Philadelphia, I left as an angry kid, and I left angry but determined. And I was determined that I, number one, would not live like that, but I would intentionally experience something better in life. And so I was able to explore what it was to be a leader in the helping profession. So I did individual and family counseling. Then I started my own counseling agency. But then because of a lack of preparation, I found myself incarcerated, facing 4 years of jail. Well, facing 12 years, but I did the agreement for 4 years of jail and 3 years of probation. And so here I am, a person that never thought that they would be involved on that side of the criminal justice system. After having helped other people manage their anger and explosive disorders, here I am behind bars in federal prison, not knowing what to do, and then having to struggle with a leadership challenge. Am I where I am because of what other people done, or am I where I am because of how I have thought? And so when I boiled it all down, I accepted the reality that as a leader, there were things that I needed to learn. Number one, I needed to learn that the system was not set up for people like me. So I matriculated and did not know about the importance of lawyers and accountants, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know about the supports that it takes to protect yourself in business. I didn't know about HR processes, et cetera. So my good brain without good support meant nothing. And there are a lot of people that have good intentions and good ideas and good brains, but without the appropriate supports, their good intentions mean nothing. So eventually I got out of prison, and gratefully I was able to, while other people on work release were landing jobs in fast food and lawn care, I was able to land a position as a director of programming, and eventually became the executive director of that workforce development program. What I learned during that time, when we began working with the Department of Labor on workforce development, what they would call employment and training administrative programs, I learned that there were 5 things that were needed in order to help someone navigate the work world and be able to re-enter the working world in a sustainable way. Number one, they needed their GED or high school equivalency. Number 2, they needed case management and counseling. Number 3, they needed leadership development. This is where the community integration comes in. They needed that. Number 4, they needed the vocational training. They needed somebody to actually teach them the technical skill. And then number 5, you need somebody to walk along with you for at least a year to manage and to navigate all of the things that would arise. We experienced a change in our neighborhood. Unemployment among young adults 16 to 24, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, in Census Tract 2, the neighborhood that I serve, it was previously 81%. As a result of our partnerships and networks, it was reduced within 3 years to 15%. And so you're able to check that data point online. The story behind the data point is not that it was done. The story behind it is how it was done. Ironically, I come to this meeting today on the heels of another meeting I had this morning with the Justice Resource Advisory Council. This is a group of judges and lawyers in North Carolina that are working to bring system level change. And what they found was that there are some things that are going on in the community that do not get the same credit as what goes on in academia. And that's not fair. It's not fair that that the people in the community who have the lived experience, for some reason, their experience has less value than the PhD, EDD, MD, et cetera, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's just not fair. And so what we have to do, and what I'm grateful to be a part of, are movements that will honor the lived experience of individuals so that we can affect change in the real world in a real way. And it's no longer a us versus them, but we can bring people together and say our community is not an inanimate object, but our community is a collective individual. It is a collective thing that is made up of many different parts. And if our head disrespects our neck, then the whole body suffers. But if we can figure out how pieces and parts of our community can come together and work together, then we can experience great things together. We can reduce economic disparities. We can reduce racial disparities. And for the sake of this conversation today, we can reduce the social economic disparities that exist because people are suffering with the disease of addiction or have been a victim of such a predatory criminal justice system. When we look at this sequential intercept model, and I'm really excited about this model, and you all are thinkers, and so you understand what I mean by excited about it. It's exciting to look at what people have studied. It's also exciting to see how the time capsule is limited. For example, the going research for sequential intercept model happens in the early 2000s, and so it catapults or is captured upon it captures upon research that had previously existed. But every research that we have is inside of a time capsule. The moment that a thing is studied, it begins to become outdated. No matter what book you write, no matter what paper you write, the white paper, the term paper, the dissertation, the thesis, no matter what you write, the moment that you print it out, sign it, and turn it in, from the time you defend it, is already outdated, okay? And so we have to look at these books and look at these studies not as the golden egg, but as a springboard. Does that make sense? You have to look at it as a springboard. And so we take guidance from Muniz and all of them, and we look at this intercept model. So the sequential intercept model has 5 points of intercept. There are 5 points of intercept in the sequential intercept model, and I'm going to talk about those intercepts, and then I'm going to give just my perspective on what might be missing or what our opportunities are, okay? So the first intercept in the sequential intercept model is law enforcement and emergency services. The second point of intercept is post-arrest. This is what happened after somebody's arrested. Initial detention and initial hearings. Number 3, the third point of intersection is the post-initial hearing. What happens after the hearing? They're in jail or prison, their courts and their fines, etc. And then the fourth intercept is re-entry from jails, prisons, hospitalizations, forensic hospitalizations. And then the fifth intercept is a community involvement, community corrections, and community support. So when we look at these 5 points of intercept, these things are happening in a sequence, but these are points where we can interject. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation awarded 21 sites across the country a grant, an amount of $1.75 million. I was part of the steering committee that received one of those awards. And what we found over the last 3 years, the data is showing that people are entering the justice system not because they have actually committed crimes, but as a result of what we all know as the social determinants of health. We know that Black and brown men are disproportionately incarcerated and targeted. We know from what's going on right now that there is a disproportionate amount of police against Black and brown males mentality. So at the point of law enforcement or emergency services, what I would call first contact, the question should be asked, why is there a first contact? For our homeless individuals that might sleep in a park, where they are where the park is no trespassing, why should they be arrested? Why does in all of our criminal justice systems in our counties, they have what is called friendly faces? Well, the friendly faces is people that we see in jail over and over again. Well, the jail system has labeled them friendly faces. Why? In one of our conversations, I asked the justice system leaders, is there any at all, is there any economic advantage for the local jail, the county jail, is there any economic advantage to people being incarcerated? And they said to me, they said, no, except if a person is incarcerated and we let them go and they are immediately reincarcerated, everything that we did to process their case, we have to process their case again. Now, my question to them was based on the premise that if we are going to lower a jail bed population, then we have to do that knowing that there is money attached to people being incarcerated. And as the researcher, Dr. Vashti McKenzie said, when you follow the money, you follow and you find out who benefits. Who benefits from people being in jail? So oftentimes we as forensic peer specialists, we're looking at the surface thing and we're having the wrong conversation, or we might be playing the wrong game, or we might be asking the wrong question. We should not only be asking what makes people feel good and be well, but we have to know how to code switch and be able to say to the powers that be, where is the money and why is the money being spent on this versus that? Y'all get what I'm saying, right? So we're able to talk about it, and this sequential intercept model, there were a few other points that I want to make about it, and then I'll give the rest of my time up. 2 problems at the first point of intercept. This is the law enforcement moment, the moment of first contact. There is disproportionate police aggression towards Black and brown people. So we know that there is unnecessary engagement with law enforcement. Knowing that, we as forensic peer specialists have to think about, what is it going to take to prevent first contact in the first place? I call this the Moses and Pharaoh syndrome. We have to go tell Pharaoh, this is the power brokers and the power that be, let our people go. And then we have to go back to our people and bop them upside the head and say, knucklehead, now get yourself together, because them folks gonna get you. They ain't playing with you. They don't like you. They don't like your mama. They don't like your daddy. They never liked you, and they out to get you. And we just have to be real enough to tell people the truth, because they're living the truth. And then they come into our pretty facilities and we want to lie to them and expect them to believe us. That don't work. We have to be able to prepare people for what's really going on. What's really going on is that there is a disproportionate involvement or police aggression towards Black and brown people. We know that. So we have to prepare folks to deal with it. We prepare through education. We prepare through community support and involvement. We prepare through awareness of rights and responsibilities. We also prepare by having wholesome programming. One of my white ally partners, wonderful woman, presented an idea to me, and I said to her, well, that sounds stupid. You know, what she was saying, it sounded good to her, but it was really stupid to me. Nobody's paying attention to that. Nobody who's in the struggle is going to pay attention to what you're talking about. So we have to think about the with them. What's in it for me? Not only for the people that we serve as the end user, but when we think about the peer industry, we have to accept the fact that the people that we serve are our employees as well. Our employees need our support. And the founder of Starbucks said, it's not about the coffee. And another wonderful book is The Customer Comes Second. When we start to look at these frontline workers, our peers, the peer specialists, we have to look at them as our first customer, because if they're well, then the people they serve will be well. The end user will be well. Now, this study also talks about, at the first intercept, there's a missing link with the disproportionate use of emergency rooms by people who are experiencing homelessness or substance use disorder. We know that people find retreat in the emergency room and they run up a tab, which messes up their credit, which leads to predatory lending, which leads to more stress. And we know that stress, 98% of all physical illness is stress related. So if we're going to change it, we need to change it at the root, not at the surface. I just think we're having the wrong conversation oftentimes. This study also includes the need at the community level, which is the 5th intercept on this. The community level involves mail and phone calls. Well, that needs to be updated because our generation is not using mail. Nobody looks at mail in the mailbox. People are not answering their phone. They're using text message and social media. We need to include that as part of the model, as a viable part of the model. And if we're going to do it, we have to all own this as a reality and do it together, so that no matter where an individual goes in this country, they'll run into Will Barnett, they'll run into Kevin Petty, they'll run into Paul Wells, they'll run into everyone who is saying the same thing. We might be saying it in different languages, but we're saying you need to meet people where they are. Utilize the resources. Trust the word on the street. Trust people who have been there and done that. And then let's come together to make significant change. When you look at the criminogenic needs of folks, we know all of this has been researched, but the criminogenic needs themselves are outdated. When you look at the 7 criminogenic needs, antisocial personality pattern, what is it about us is antisocial? Who said it was antisocial? Let's look at it. Let's not just accept it at face value. Pro-criminal attitudes. Why is this attitude criminal? If I am stealing in order to feed people, or if I'm breaking the law in order to feed people, do I have a criminal mindset or do I have a survival mindset? And if you're going to help me, then help me think differently. Don't accuse me of being a criminal at heart when I was just doing illegal activities just to maintain, not to hurt somebody. Now, we're not trying to change or make legal what is already illegal. What we're saying is that we have the opportunity to introduce a different conversation, and we're trusted with that, and we need to speak up for it. The poor use of leisure time. Why is our use of leisure time poor use? And then substance abuse. Nobody wants to be a substance abuser. Where does it come from? And then problematic marital or family circumstances. Why are our families broken? They're broken because we are still recovering from 400 years of slavery that said that whatever we did was illegal. And the police were utilized as the white woman's strong-arm security guard. So we have to look at the core of these things and begin to work with our partners and with community stakeholders, whether they're Black, brown, white, Asian, otherwise, and say, y'all, let's take a look and not accept these things as face value. The Sequential Intercept Model was good for foundational learning and understanding. But right now, we have the opportunity to make another intercept and add another rung in the sequence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hackett. Your talk today was like a vitamin for me. I'm energized, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that feels that way. I have to tell you, every time I hear you, it's just reaffirms more and more that we need to work together. We need to intersect, right?
Yeah.
Intersect. So we can do more work in this community, because, when our values are in alignment, we can move together as a group a lot further than we can as individuals. I want to do some housekeeping real fast. I want to make sure that everyone knows that if you have any questions for the panelists, you can put it in the chat box, or the Q&A. And at the very end, we've reserved some time for panel question and answers. And also that if there's any segment or part that you missed of this presentation, we will have the recording posted on prestigecommunityresources.org, which is the nonprofit website, prestigecommunityresources.org. And if you go to seminars or webinars on the link, you'll see the presentation, the replay of this and the other webinars that we've done. Okay, now for our next speaker. And I have to tell you, I'm energized now. Lord knows what I'm gonna be like when she finishes. Dr. Masika Jordan. Dr. Jordan graduated from the University of Maryland, Bowie State University in 2003 with a BS in sociology, and in 2005 with an MA in counseling psychology. Thereafter, she completed a Doctorate of Education in Counseling Psychology in 2010. Dr. Jordan is a licensed clinical professional counselor, LCPC, and a certified peer recovery specialist. In addition to formal education, Dr. Jordan has lived experience as a peer in the recovering community, having overcome substance abuse herself, as well as having lost her father and several other relatives to substance misuse. She has turned her pain into passion and is motivated to improve recovery for all through building the peer recovery workforce throughout the United States and abroad. Dr. Jordan is the CEO of, she's the founder of Jordan Peer Recovery and a professor at the University of Maryland as Bowie State University, a member institution of the University System of Maryland. She is a former executive director of organizational excellence for Volunteers of America, Chesapeake, and Carolinas. She is the CEO of Peer Affinity, LLC, a leader in delivering personalized, culturally responsive, tech-enabled peer support to individuals diagnosed and treated for the chronic disease of addiction and mental health conditions. The company is recognized for its innovative use of proprietary recovery mapping system that delivers intuitive and outcome-driven support services, delivering long-term peer support and recovery solutions through certified, highly trained peer supporters. Now that's a mouthful. Dr. Jordan is a subject matter expert on culturally responsiveness. In addition to teaching multicultural counseling for over 10 years in collegiate settings, she has presented on international platforms on race relations and has been on the front line advocating for cultural diversity and training amongst the peer recovery and behavioral health workforces. In addition, she has created a proprietary educational system for developing cultural responsiveness. The system has been used in agencies throughout the US for peers and other behavioral health professionals. Some of those agencies include the Houston Recovery Center, Sobriety Center, Friends of Recovery in New York, the Shepherd and Enoch Pratt Hospital, and Baltimore Alliance for Careers in Healthcare. In addition, Dr. Jordan has been on the front line of combating the opioid epidemic. In 2019, Dr. Jordan provided expert testimony to the US government's Accountability Office, GAO, on peer recovery and technologies to address the opioid epidemic. Jordan Peer Recovery has received multiple awards from the Maryland Department of Labor, Licensing Regulations, and Subawardee for the US Department of Health and Human Services, HRSA, Health Resources and Services Administration, and the Baltimore Population Health Workforce, in training close to 1,000 peers who are on the front line of the opioid epidemic in Maryland, Washington, DC, and Virginia. Before I turn it over, I also want to say that Prestige, in partnership with Dr. Jordan, was recently awarded a HRSA grant to be able to provide peer support training for opioid impacted families in the district, which I think is a huge accomplishment for both Prestige and for the district as well. Without any further ado, I want to turn over to you, Dr. Masika Jordan.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if I want to say thank you for being a longstanding partner with us. And also, if I sound anything like Dr. Hackett, it's because I'm a student of his. So if you hear some synergy there, all I can say is he's a great teacher. I won't be with you long. I want to go over some key points, as I think they are definitely need to be looked at when we have a discussion around restorative justice. I think I sent some slides there, but we don't have to. So the color of change in crisis, the focus on peer recovery and reentry is kind of the lane I'll come from with some key points today. If we can go on to the next slide. When we talk about the problems that exist around the peer recovery and reentry movement, some of the hiccups, some of the hurdles, some of the things while we start with this evidence-based practice that may slow us down if we don't train for them and make sure that we have the mechanisms in place to go through and over them, then we will end up not really creating a system. Because when we talk about restorative justice, you're talking about individuals, but we're also talking about systems. And you have to address it from both a sociological perspective, which looks at systems, and an individual perspective, like a counseling model that looks at the individual. Both. You have individuals running systems. And so there's always a need to go back and forth and have a dual-sided paradoxical conversation. We can go to the next slide. So I won't go too much and belabor too much into this piece, but the American Psychological Association president says that we are in a racism pandemic. She recently declared it a racism pandemic. So not only a COVID-19 pandemic, but a racism pandemic. And when we talk about a pandemic, we're talking about the reason she was able to declare it a racism pandemic is because of the health outcomes. And so when you heard Dr. Hackett say that 98% of diseases were lifestyle diseases, these are related to stress. Well, if you think about the stress and the impact on racism, you got to look at it and how it impacts both healthcare systems and also the restorative justice movement, or at least the intentions of a restorative justice movement. The pandemic has a widespread touch, and we'll talk about those things in the 8 systems. If you go to the next slide. You can go to the next one. So if you want to respond to a racism pandemic, an opiate pandemic, a reentry pandemic, all of these things that really are the cousins of everything that's connected with racism, because the systems in itself, when you heard Dr. Hackett, goes back to slavery days, then if the system is not fit, then you won't have outcomes that fit the narrative that we're trying to create. On average, in every single one of our systems, there is a crisis going on for African American males in particular. So I want to talk about that. If you go to the next slide. Whenever you talk about healthcare, you're talking about the social determinants of health. It's a common conversation. And normally when we're talking about the social determinants of health, we're talking about the social determinants of health from a widespread touch. We're talking about the social determinants of health from not just an African-American lens, but from a general lens. But when we have that conversation about a general lens, there's some things that we have to hone in on when we're talking about African-American males. And part of that is that the outcomes that relate to all of these systems are more dire for African-American males than any other system. And when you have employment and work conditions, education and literacy, childhood experiences, social support and coping skills, access to health services, gender, biological conditions, predispositions. And we can have another conversation on another day about genomes and genetics and healthy behaviors and things that are picked up and learned, because all behaviors are learned. Social and the environments that we have redlined African-American populations into, physical environments, income and social status. Then what you're looking at is an incubator for outcomes. And when we talk about outcomes, you got to look at data around African-American males being per capita, and based on the population that we represent in America, 13% of the population, but nearly a third, and in most states over half of the prison population, then we know that there's something inside of these social determinants of health that need to be explored from the social determinants of reentry. If you go to the next slide. So if we explore it from that lens, then we have to look at the 8 systems, 8 influential systems. So in every single part of the world, you're going to have these 8 systems that are primary culture shaping areas of influence. And then when you take a deeper look at these, then you can understand, if we say influence, when you think about influence, kind of think it like I'm putting my hand on top of yours. And so this is the influencer. I'm putting pressure on top of you. If I put pressure on top of you, you have to be big enough to bear the weight. Well, what's happening is if the structure is not big enough to bear the weight, you're going to have symptoms of a virus. A virus looks like a cold if we're talking about healthcare. If we're talking about COVID-19, it may look like a cough, it may look like a fever. But if you're talking about symptoms of a racist system, if you're talking about symptoms of social determinants of health, if you're talking about symptoms that are imbalanced for African-American males, then your symptoms may not look like a cough, but it may look like reentry outcomes that are dire. It may look like educational outcomes that are dire. It may look like environmental systems that are dire, entertainment systems that are dire, economic systems that are dire, governmental systems dire, religious systems dire, technology and sociological systems dire. And let me give you an example of that. When you take a look at the educational system, nationwide research shows the high school graduation rate for Black males is about 59%. This is the lowest of any single population. So you could say, well, they need to go to school. Well, that would only be taking the individual look. But remember, we have to bring the conversation up a notch and have it from a sociological perspective. When you have it from a sociological perspective, it'll paint a different picture for you. It'll paint a picture that white female teachers have been teaching African-American males predominantly in the classroom, and there's not an understanding of a culture. And so when you're acting out, I might think you're acting out if I'm a white female, but what you're really demonstrating is that you don't have visual learning, a visual learning preference, in that you don't have an auditory learning preference. Instead, you're kinesthetic. It means that you learn with your hands, which is culturally responsive for African-American males, because the bulk of African-American males have a preference for cultural, hands-on, kinesthetic learning. It means when I get the IKEA box in the mail, I don't read the instructions. I put my hands on it and figure out how to do it. And for most of us, for African-American populations and Black and brown populations, this is what's happening, but it's not what's happening in the traditional classroom settings inside of the US. And so I diagnose you with ADHD, and then I tell you that you don't belong in my classroom because you're bad. And so then I have to restructure you. By the time you're you're 8 in the 3rd grade, the educational system is starting to separate the elite from the non-elite. And it's not because you're not really elite, it's that the system was never conducive for you anyway. And so when you think about the prison to pipeline conversation, there's a need to analyze that inside of these 8 systems, 8 primary cultural shaping systems, not just for education, but to take a deeper look at each one of these systems. Because until you fix the systems, then you can't impact the outcomes. Until you fix the systems, we can have restorative justice conversations, but there's some people that should never even be involved in the justice system to start with, because we should have fixed the systems. Or when you're returning home, if the systems are not conducive for you, what you end up having is repeated offenses. But it's not offenses, it's that the systems are not conducive for you. And so we have to do exactly what Dr. Hackett mentioned. We have the Moses and Pharaoh conversation with Pharaoh, let my people go. But we also have a peer reentry forensic peer specialist that walks with you hand in hand. And so by definition, peer recovery is literally, you can go to that slide that says peer recovery on it and the definitions of it. So if you go to the definition of peer recovery, is that I take my lived experience. And for me, my husband is a reentry citizen. My Dr. Hackett, who's a teacher to me, but he's so much more than a teacher to me. He's covering for me. That is another reentry citizen. My biological father was a reentry citizen. And so when I look around, and my brother was a reentry citizen, when I look around in the conversation is for all of these reentry citizens with all of their valuable experience, if you have navigated the waters from your lens and you have been in a position where you could transition and be successful without recidivism, meaning you figured out how to navigate through all of the issues in these 8 systems and still end up in a place where you are functioning and you're doing well, then what happens is I need to equip you so that you can go work and help other people. And so Dr. Hackett is the chair of Jordan Peer Recovery. And so he takes his experience and he helps us to build a model that is conducive for training people who come home with these lived experiences to say, hey, we're going to give you the education necessary so that when you go into the courtrooms and you're advocating, you have a credential, not because credentials mean everything, but you have to have something that'll stamp that you have gone and that the systems have given you a green lights up. And it also helps you to be able to take your education and your lived experience and put it through a funnel where you're able to multiply the use of it in more than just one way. And we teach you how to do that when we're having those trainings for forensic peer recovery. We actually have peers who are reentry citizens that are trainers delivering that curriculum. Why? Because they add their formal education along with their lived experiences, and they make it a better environment so that our peers that are going out to deliver these tools are doing so in a way that is conducive for and culturally responsive for the populations. I'm going to bring this plane home for Landon, saying this, that we have to increase the number of peers, specifically peer recovery specialists that are trained to work with reentry citizens. In some places in the US, they call them reentry peers. Others they're calling them forensic peer recovery specialists. In DC, Maryland, and Virginia, DCAPC is the local certification board, and Jordan Peer Recovery has a curriculum that is 100% approved to deliver the training necessary to get that initial certification. And then we offer this specialty training to offer that credential, that endorsement, to make you a specialized to work with your experience, your lived and your training experience, to deliver the services so that you can walk hand in hand with another person through their processes of successfully re-entering society. I don't think we have to continue to look at recidivism and say, well, this is the norm. We recreate the norm, we change it, because you got to introduce something new. And this is the thing that we're introducing that's new. So thank you for your time, and I welcome all questions at the end, and I'll be here to respond. Have a great rest of your sessions.
Dr. Jordan, it's always a pleasure to hear from you. Yeah, it is always a pleasure to hear from you. I'd love to hear both you and Dr. Hackett. I think that you guys are very, very much motivational for me, as well as I'm sure everyone that's on the in the webinar at this point. There are one thing I wanted to mention, just in alignment with what Dr. Jordan brought up, is in the district, we and when I say we, I'm talking about everybody in the audience as well. We need to work together and push toward legislating forensic peer support in order to provide the services that our family members, the men that are coming home, the women that are coming home, the people that are involved in the justice system. The best, when I got clean, one of the things I heard when I first got here is that one addict helping another is without parallel. Because we live and we learn from a social perspective, it's important that social learning continue in everything that we do. So if we have people that are dying in the community, it's important for people who've gone through what they're going through to be able to reach out and help them, because they clearly understand what the challenges are. They clearly understand what the supports that are needed, because they had to access them to get through what they went through, right? So if we can legislate forensic peer support as a service in the district, which, other states have it, why don't we have it? And I can't begin to talk about why we should have it, but I'm just going to bring that up. I wanted to make that comment. I think it's time for a commercial break, so I'm going to ask that Crystal, if you could pull up our slide for the phone drive. And I can talk a little bit about one of the things that Prestige, I have to pay the bills as well. And Prestige Community Resources provides us with a platform where we can do good work. The homelessness in the district is off the charts. Yesterday I did an outreach. I distributed Narcan and did some harm reduction stuff to probably 100, 150 people in the course of about 3 hours. We passed out close to 200 sandwiches, and the proportion of homelessness in the district is one of those things that creates the pressure so that people can't rise. Could you go to the next slide, please? The quality of life and the survival impact. I'm going to talk a little bit about the survival impact. Phones can increase emergency response by 90%. I've had consumers die on me who died alone. I remember getting a call from the chief medical examiner, one of my consumers who had been homeless for about 15 years. He was an elderly gentleman. He worked for the post office for about 30 years of his life. When he retired, he didn't have a lot of resources, loss of his family, and he did not have a phone. The chief medical examiner called me to find out if there was a presence of some health issues. As he suspected there was. And, you know, the guy had a seizure. And in inclement weather, he was in the back of a truck off of New York Avenue, parked in a parking lot. That was his shelter. And for someone over the age of 6, an elder who's living in the back of a truck with no contact, if someone could have called an ambulance, he may be here today, but unfortunately, he did not have any connection. So we lost a life. So give a phone, save a life. Our latest initiative is dedicated to expanding our focus to the homeless community, underserved demographics, and has a limited to no ability to engage with desperately needed essential services like 911, medical facilities, and critical organizations. What Prestige does is, through a partnership with AT&T, is we're able to buy phones at a low rate, roughly about $50. And we also, with the phone, we commit to paying the bill for the next year. Generally, each phone costs about $360 to be able to provide a service that could possibly save a life. And the way that I did it is I went online to our website, prestigecommunityresources.org. I decided to make a donation. And just like with United Way, you can donate a portion of your $30 every pay period. They'll deduct it from your account. You don't see it. It's pre-tax dollars, and it goes to a worthy cause. Okay, Crystal, we're going to move on to the next person. I want to do one of my most favorite people too. I got a lot of favorite people on here. I was introduced to Roach Brown, and recently I was in a meeting, and there was a guy in the meeting who had been the medical director at Department of Health. Now he works for a MCO, and he has a very high level position. We were talking about forensic peer support, and Roach Brown's name came up. He realized that Roach Brown was one of our board members at Prestige, and his eyes just lit up. And the only thing he could do is talk about Roach. Like, Roach Brown has blazed the trail for many people. I first met him through some colleagues at the Alliance of Concerned Men, which I thought had a very noble, they do very noble work in the district. He was one of the people that helped develop that organization. At age 20, Roach Brown was convicted of murder and received a life sentence. While in solitary confinement, Roach wrote a poem in the dust under his bunk called Christmas in Prison. The poem evolved into a play called Christmas in Time, and the Inner Voices drama group was formed. After over 500 performances outside the gates of prison, on Christmas Day 1975, Roach Brown received a presidential commutation from President Gerald Ford. That's why every day is Christmas to Roach. And if you know this guy, do not be surprised when he walks up and he says, "Merry Christmas" in the middle of June, or "Happy Groundhog's Day." Roach Brown is the host. Currently, he's the host of Crossroads radio show. And Kichi Taifa Justice Roundtable convened the first ever radiothon on clemency and criminal justice issues on Friday, June 17th, 2016. The event was held from noon to 6 p.m. And I'm reading right off the PFW website. A very array of criminal justice professionals recently released Obama commutees and currently incarcerated individuals all participated to offer solutions to mass incarceration. So he's been an advocate against mass incarceration, against the treatment of our people in prison. He's been an advocate on the front line, and everybody that knows this guy will tell you about the wonderful work that he's done. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Roach Brown.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks a lot, Will, for inviting me. And it's an honor to be on a panel with such distinguished PhDs and LLDs and my man, Kevin Petty. I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. And for those folk who are here with the PhDs, I got my PhD from the University of DC. That's the University Department of Corrections. I did 30 years and 4 months in prison on installment plan. And we started in 1968, 52 years ago, that we've been doing this work. And it seems like things are only getting worse and worse. As Will said, we've been doing this for a while. And it touches my heart to hear what both of the doctors have said in terms of reentry. We started that group in Lawton, the Inner Voices putting on prison plays. But besides that, one of the key ingredients, Will, that kept the group together and kept us from escaping is we had our own personal internal group therapy sessions which I led the group. I didn't have a high school diploma, didn't know a damn thing about therapy or nothing, but I knew that the closer we got to each other, the less chance we have of somebody absconding and running off on us. And we had a rule in there. If you wanted to escape, I would help you over the fence. But don't escape on this group, man. Because too many people are risking their lives on reaching other folk to try to keep them from coming in. So that philosophy stayed with us for the whole while throughout the duration of the group. We took a national tour with Richard Pryor from Lawton. He came in and took us to 5 states across the country. All of us were serving 20 years of life, 30, 40, 50 years. And we returned. And one of the reasons is, we wanted to make sure that the other kids didn't experience what we did. I was threatened and was almost stabbed a couple of times in Lawton Reformatory because we fought against the rape of young men coming in. I didn't like the idea. If somebody wanted to go that way, let that be his call. You're not going to make nobody be something that he don't want to be. So we used to get together, a group of guys, and guys were saying I was going against the prison culture. I didn't care nothing about the culture. That was somebody's brother, somebody's son, and it could have been my brother or my son. And I don't want to see nobody have the advantage taken of him. So this is how we got involved in this. And everybody who spoke was right and accurate. It's all about, we're dealing with the symptoms of lack of resources, lack of socioeconomic conditions, education, et cetera, aside. And it hurts me when you go to prison, they tell you go in front of the parole board and they ask, have you been rehabilitated? No, I haven't. Rehabilitation means to restore one to his original form. So if I was a bank robber when I came in, I'm a bank robber when I go out. You know what I mean? So rehabilitation don't fit us. And they keep saying, you need to get your life in order. Your life wasn't in order before you came to prison. You didn't have a home, your father's in jail, your mother's on drugs, you don't have a substandard education, no medical services, and they say, you got to get your life to go. And I got a friend who just came out, he did 36 years. And they gave him $18 upon his release and told him to have a nice life. Then he go out and they gave him a few hours of call. And he was 2 hours late calling back in. They was threatening to lock him back up. And they asked him, why didn't you call? He said, I couldn't find a phone booth. That goes back to what the Dr. Lee and Dr. was saying, Hackett. Adjusting to the outside after being in prison 30, 40 years and you're in an environment where you're always wrong, no matter what the issue is, you're penalized, you're ostracized, you're punished, and you're isolated. And this happens daily inside. So this builds up psychological baggage. And when these men and women come out, it's even hard for a guy to get a girlfriend after 30, 40 years. You don't know how to talk to a woman after 30 years. You walk up to a chick and say, hey, baby, what's your sign? And they look at you and start laughing. Where are you from? You've been gone so long, you forget the colloquialisms or the languages or the customs and how to get on a streetcar or bus, subway, how to interact. And you don't have positive conversations inside a prison with the staff. So that whole communication model has to be expanded. We came up with a program similar to what both doctors have mentioned called PISS, P-I-S-S, Post-Incarcerated Stress Syndrome. And I came up with a program out there they call OA, Offender Anonymous, to address the social, psychological, and technological advances that have occurred while these men and women are inside. I came out and went to Union Station after about 7, 8 years. When I went in, a chocolate chip cookie cost 35 to 50 cents. I went over to get a cookie, a great big chocolate chip cookie, and the guy said $5. I looked at him, I said, man, don't you do that to me. You must know I just came out of the joint. There ain't no $5 for one cookie. But you fail to realize that inflation increases 5 to 7% while you're gone. So if you're gone 20, 30, 40, 50 years, what you paid 25 cents for. Yesterday, we was at Ben's Chili Bowl, and we got an interview, and they asked, it was a 62nd year anniversary. And I came in, I used to go in the Chili Bowl when I was a kid. When I went in, 2 hot dogs you could buy for $1. 2 hot dogs for $1. Now 1 hot dog costs you $9.50 for 1 hot dog. So these changes, subtle as they may be, affect somebody's stress level, somebody's adjustment level, being able to communicate. And there's a group that meets every Wednesday in Washington, D.C., conducted by Eric Weaver, and it's similar to what we're talking about. Everybody in prison should have mental health counseling before they come out, not when they get out. You got to defuse or depressurize them before they hit the street. And the gentleman that Will talked about, Dr. Reed Tuxton, he's with a group called the Blacks Against COVID-19. And he's recruiting people from Howard University, the Hospital, the School of Social Work, and a few others to see if we can develop a safety net for those men and women coming out. I just got a school teacher just came out. She did 19 years because she answered the phone. She never touched the drugs, never saw the drugs, but because the other conspirators were dealing with volume, they charged her with the same volume they had, even though she never saw the drugs and never touched them, and she got life. Now she did 19 years, and we were fortunate enough to have her come home about a month ago. And this lady is in a state of fear. She don't know what to do, where to go, who to turn to. And they talk about we're criminals. That's a damn lie. We ain't no criminals. There's 2 types of crimes: crime of need and crime of greed. And if you got to commit a crime, when I grew up, I used to rob, steal, do everything. And it wasn't me, it wasn't wrong. It was our lifestyle. I couldn't get a job. My other part of my family were light-skinned, they were middle class, they lived in another part of Washington. I lived behind the ghetto. And one of my cousins got to be a brain surgeon. And I often thought, if I was raised in that particular household, would I wind up in prison? Or would I had another opportunity? I didn't have them opportunities. And folks, I'm so glad that the virus is hit for one reason, this coronavirus. I'm glad it's hit. It stopped the school to prison pipeline. No kids are going to school. So no kids are being locked up and being detained. And we read 2 weeks ago of a judge sent us a 15-year-old black girl to detention for not doing her homework. That's not a crime. They're locking up black folks for issues that's not even crimes. Most of the men and women are being shot and killed by the police are non-felonies or misdemeanors or non-violent offenses. And people losing their life because of the brutality and the racism of the police department. Yes, it's racist. I grew up with the cops. I used to see them come down there and take my cousins and aunts out in the backyard and do what they're going to do with them and bring them back. They knock our door down. We didn't have there wasn't no such thing as a search warrant. If they wanted you, they came and got you. And if you didn't tell them what they wanted to know, you got a whipping. And I just want to throw this out in closing, Will. When you see a black guy being arrested, and the police, all of a sudden, there's 1 or 2 there. And then when they call for reinforcements, automatically the reinforcements just jump in. They don't ask, what's the issue or what's the beef? They jump in, grab this person and slam them on the ground. And when they say stop resisting, how can you not resist when somebody's breaking your arm up your back, got the knee in your neck on your side, and they tell you stop? Your personal space as a human being and as a man has been violated. And it doesn't make no difference. If you got the power to do it or don't do it, you're still being violated. And instinctively, you resist or oppose, then you get beat up worse and you get charged with assault. So this whole thing of throwing black men on the ground, the minute you see it, I am afraid. I'm scared to death. I said on the radio show, I'm in terror. The word terror, according to Webster, means to instill fear. The police have instilled fear all over this country. And when I see a cop behind me, I start shaking. Because when they stopped me before in the past and they read my record, I didn't know they had a computer that could access your record right there on the spot. When they found out I went to prison for first-degree murder, and they said, how did you get out? And they pulled a gun out. Then they called 2 more squad cars and make me lay on the ground. And the police got his gun pointed at me and he's shaking. I said, but the president let me out. He said, don't say that on this computer. How did you get out? And I'm surrounded with cops with guns on them. And all I'm pointing at me. And I'm scared to death I'm going to get killed because of what happened 45 years ago. I was convicted, sentenced, and commuted my sentence by the president. But yet I still have to pay for it anytime the cops stop me. And I am scared to death. I'm scared whenever I see a black person stopped by the cops. I'll pull my car over and take my camera out. And if you think this is something, they are doing worse to the men and women in prison. Ladies, gentlemen, everybody on this panel, please bear in mind, if they're doing this and killing us in the street and there's cameras, there's visibility, there's witnesses, what do you think they're doing to the men and women inside the institutions when there's no cameras, there's no witnesses? And what they're doing on top of the violence of the coronavirus, these men and women are being brutalized. There's been riots all over the world in prisons and jails. Afghanistan released 80,000 prisoners. The Bureau of Prison released less than 900 out of 160,000 people. A judge recently in New York City, just last month, denied the release of 537 prisoners at MCC, Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown New York. And the judge said the reason why he denied them release because of the virus threat is that nobody died yet. They released these 2 judges who sentenced our kids to prison. The prison scandal. They was taking money to take little black kids and send them to private prison detention facilities, and they got paid a couple $1 million. And these judges were released due to the threat of the coronavirus. We got black men and women in institutions with wheelchairs, walkers, blind, handicapped, and disabled, and they are eligible to be released because they're vulnerable to the threat of this coronavirus. And we need to stand up and organize and mobilize. A lot of our own people say, damn people in jail. Lady, that says Jesus Christ was in jail when they took him out and crucified him on the cross. They took him out the cell. Being in jail don't make you a bad person. If I take a nail and nail into 2x4 one time and nail 2 pieces of wood together, that don't make me no carpenter. If I commit 1 or 2 crimes, I'm committing my crime because I needed it. We've been hungry, broke, nothing to eat. We had a house with no running water, no indoor plumbing, no electricity. We had to stand in line like you do in the street with a bucket and get water to take back to our house and wash up and cook with a bucket. So so we go out and take something. My mother said, don't do that. That's against the, don't do that. But if our brand come in with $400 or $500 and we got 8 brothers and sisters in there, nobody eating, mom ain't gonna say nothing. And like one other thing, Will, I come from 3 generations of drug addicts. My grandfather was a drug addict. My father was a drug addict. And I was a drug addict. And virtually everybody we meet, or majority of the men and women we meet, have some form of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or whatever. And to me, these guys are not criminals. The women are not criminals. They had to survive. And if we don't improve the conditions that lead to the things we're talking about right now, we're talking about the symptoms of a denial of services, the lack of opportunities in our community. It's a damn shame they tell us we're to do this, and we don't even have it's like we tell, I don't know what to say, man. I'm just messed up. This stuff hurts. I've been doing this for 52 years, and I don't know what else to do. I won't stop. I can't stop. And I just like to say that whatever we can do to help anybody on that radio show, we got the #2 rated radio show on criminal justice and prisoner rights worldwide. And we get responses from all over the world. And Black people are catching hell all over the world. Australia, the Aborigines make up 6% of the population, yet they make up 45% of the prison population. 7 out of every 10 Black males got a criminal record, been arrested, or been in prison. That's 70% of Black males have had some kind of confrontation with the police department. Then when you do that, you're branded, you're isolated, you got a label that you can't get a job, you're a returning citizen, you're ex-offender, and for the rest of your life, you got the kid. It's just like having leprosy. You can't seem to get it off of you. So we need folks like you, the panel, Kevin, and both doctors. We need your support to make this happen. I'll just shut up, Will, because my hair's beginning to grow, and I can't talk long when my hair starts to grow. You know what I mean? And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Roach, it's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure. You know, I'm just, my cup is running over right now. I'm hearing some great things from what I think are like really great people. You know, I'm going to share a quick story, and then we're going to go to the panel discussion. We're going to ask questions, the panelists. You know, when I look back on my journey, I remember I used to work for CBS. I was working with a lot of entertainers. I was working in the music industry. But somebody in the industry turned me on to heroin. I became addicted and followed the thing that you learn in the whole recovery process is if I continue to use, it's jails, institutions, and death. So my life was going down the tubes. And somehow or other, I'm not sure how it happened, but I ended up in facing a judge. And he was very clear. You know, you're either going to get clean through a treatment program, or you're doing 15 years. And up to that point, I had spent a year in jail trying to get in a treatment program. And I heard from every treatment program in the city, we are not going to accept you, right? Because we just don't have the space, which means there's a lack of resources. I had a friend of mine that was close to the mayor at the time, and it was Marion Barry. And Marion Barry said something very important in the Washington Post. He said it to the president. And basically, he said that, you know, we take care of our own. And I heard it again years later when Obama took office. And he said that it's everyone's responsibility to be a part of the solution. That he could not do it alone, but we all have to do our part. I went to that treatment program. Not only did I complete the program, eventually I became the director of the program because I made a decision. I made a decision that I wanted to live. And I'm going to echo everything that I've heard this morning when I say that, you know, people who are coming home from prison, people that use drugs, you know, it is not easy to use drugs. You have to be very resourceful. I can't imagine what it was like for Kevin Petty at age 8. If we can take this energy and this creativity and this motivation and this passion and direct it, we can make change. We can't wait for someone else to come along and tell us that they're ready for us to change. We have to change ourselves. It begins with us. So I definitely believe and support the peer model. You know, your life education is just as important as your book education. And you really have to have both to be able to navigate. So I'm going to open it up. I've got a question from Raymond. I'm not sure who that is. Would you agree that those of us working with justice-involved people need to be able to engage both the individual as well as the system monitoring them? And I'm going to ask that question to Dr. Hackett. Dr. Hackett first.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
Would you agree that people working with justice-involved individuals should also have input into the systems that are monitoring them?
Yes, they should. Oftentimes they're part of the problem. These people that are working with justice involved citizens, they're approaching it from a number of different places. It could be that they had life experience that tells them they want to help. It could be that they have a hero syndrome and they want to be Superman to a Lois Lane. And it could be that they have some deep-seated aggression that they want to enact. They could have their own ulterior motives that they want to use to push their own personal policy forward. There are all kinds of reasons why they are there. And if we look at a community, we have to communicate with everybody. So everybody has to come into the awareness of what's wrong. And it doesn't matter whether they have been a victim of it or a proprietor of it. They need to come in contact with the information and wrestle with the information, and have a feeling about it, be a human about it, think about what it would have been if it was their dad, mom, son, nephew, etc., and then come to a conclusion. I'm not an anti anything. I think that everybody needs to come into the discussion and learn. They are part of the problem. They need to be part of the solution. Likewise, our young adults are part of the problem. They need to be part of the solution. Likewise, our police chiefs are part of the problem. They need to be part of the solution. Likewise, our judges are part of the problem. They need to be part of the solution. It takes everybody. So yes, they need to be part of the conversation.
Dr. Jordan, same question.
Can you repeat that question, Will?
I certainly can. The question is, would you agree that those of us working with justice-involved people need to engage both the individual and the system monitoring them?
Yeah, when I spoke about the 8 systems of influence, you have entertainment, economy, education, environment, government, religion, technology, and sociology. If you touch one and you don't touch the other, and we're talking about influence in all of those areas, especially in the governmental arena, but if you don't touch one system, it's almost like I'm gonna treat COVID-19 in Prince George's County and I'll leave water off alone. Well, it's going to spread. And so if you don't impact one system because we close out the conversation to the other individuals that are in that system, then we're limiting, one, our ability to impact and to actually change the systems. And we're also limiting the resources available for the individuals that need to receive services in each one of those systems. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my take. I think everyone needs to have all hands on deck.
No, I completely agree with you. I thought you definitely addressed it. I'm going to move over to Kevin Petty. What are some of the resources that were instrumental for you as a certified peer in developing your own business and your business plan? How'd you go about doing that?
What went into I'm sorry. What went into my business model in doing this?
What were some of the resources that were important for you to be able to open up your own business and come up with a business plan?
Well, I mean, the area that we're dealing, this is all human endeavor. This is dealing with humans, and most of the resources on this particular level is with the government. So if you can find a way to get inside that dysfunctional system, you're gonna get access to some resources of doing it. But you have to stay clear. I try to stay clear of allowing, once you get involved with government money, they try to tinker with your model. All right, and that's what the biggest fight is on that particular level, to stay independent. So that's the way we had to do it starting out. Now we're at a stage of getting donors and creating business models inside of our ministry that helps us to stay independent of government money. But in this area, you talk about housing, you can't get around not getting access to government resources if you're going to do it, especially dealing with housing. If you're gonna you're going to be effective in any kind of way. The government has the resources, it has the money, it don't know how to spend it, and it needs us to tell them how to spend it and how it will be spent in our community in that sense. But I try to stay completely independent. I try to stay true to my vision that God has given me to do this particular work in the community. I live in the community that I'm working in. Okay, so I'm sitting there. I'm there every day. Okay, I'm in the poorest community in Washington D.C. and I live there. Right, and so the government, nobody else can come and tell me what need to be done in this community, right? Of folks, I'm there, but staying true to what your vision is, right? And there's multiple ways to get access to resources. If the government refuses to allow me access to some of their resources at this particular stage, I'm fully aware to build my own businesses and use the resources from that to do my work. Okay, so I don't have to be a slave to anything. I love my people. This is a mission God has given me. It was the reason I was saved. You know part of my story. I OD'd 8 times. Okay, I didn't have to be here today, right? So I'm here for a reason. Okay, and
So one of your resources was faith.
Say that again.
One of your resources was faith. Faith.
Right.
Faith.
Yes. It was it's my biggest resource. That regardless. But I know I'm looking at the reality and what I did was I started looking at all of the organizations that were doing it before I did, and where their resources was coming from, and what was the number one resource. And everybody started. Government is a starting point with their money, but if you stay there, then you become part of that system. But we've been pretty good, been able to sustain ourselves. We've been operating the past 3 years with no contract, other than the one we have with the private prison down there. We just got the CSOSA contract July 1st. So the federal government hadn't been part of this on no level the past 3.5 years.
I'm going to move to the next question, and it's going to be for Roach Brown. Roach, I know that you have done a great job of inviting some people who just got out of prison who are success stories. One of my peers that I was actually in a treatment program with, I met him in 1986. He was illegally arrested and, not illegally arrested, he was arrested and given an illegal sentence. According to the Justice Department, he should have got 7 years. He ended up doing 27 years before they finally figured out they need to let him out. He's, my understanding, the only person that the first person Obama commuted from this area. Mm-hmm. And part of it was because he was sentenced as a 3 strikes. He had never committed a felony. He had misdemeanors, but on his first felony, on they used a 3-strike rule and gave him life without the possibility of parole. He did 27 years. He just came home probably 2 years ago, and he's doing really well. And I applaud the fact that you bring those kinds of people onto your radio show so their stories can be heard. I do think that the public needs to hear an unedited version of what is really going in our community. But what gives you hope? Why such passion about what you do?
Well, I think part of that comes from, when you're seeing what's happening, man, my whole family was in prison. When I said I was a 3rd-generation addict, I'm also a 3rd-generation returning citizens. My grandfather was in prison, my father, we were all in there together. And I've seen guys, man, who I knew were not a danger, wasn't a threat, but because of the circumstances of the situation they was caught in, they get caught up in anything, and you'd go to court and you think that the court stands for what it's supposed to stand for, to be fair, the scales of justice are balanced. The minute they lock you up, you find out that you are a slave. You have no rights. And when that happens to you, and I was beaten severely, and it busted my head open, kicked my teeth out. I was placed in solitary for 8 months. I wrote that poem, Christmas in Prison. They took me out of solitary and took me straight to St. Elizabeth's Hospital at 22 years old. For the criminally insane, I did 3 years, had a couple of with the shock therapy treatments. I was getting all this medication. It wasn't because I was sick. It was for punishment and for control, because I wouldn't keep my mouth shut and I kept speaking up. And these kind of things stick with you. And if you ever been paralyzed and never think you're going to live again or walk again, and I had life, it was never even coming out. Everything happened to me was final. I was never coming home. I got sick. I wasn't supposed to walk again or talk again. And we were kept overcoming these kind of things. And I look back and I see my buddies and my friends, see little guys who were A students who just happened to be on the corner when the cops came by. And they throw these little kids in these prisons, man. And some of them commit suicide. They get sexually assaulted. Their spirit is destroyed, and their life is destroyed, and the whole family is destroyed. And everybody in my family has been in prison. All the males in my family have been in prison. And when you, like somebody said earlier, when you go there, it's friendly faces. You know everybody in jail because they're from your neighborhood. And that hurt. And it hurt. So I started writing poems and started writing plays. And I found out that one of the easiest ways to change attitudes and opinions is to put it on the stage when people can be disconnected from it and they see somebody else going through that situation. And it happens. So I don't know, except that I've been hurt deeply. Hurt people, but hurt people also help other hurt people. And that's what we've been doing. And this stuff we're talking about, it's like getting rid of the racism in America. It's like taking a cup of coffee and you put in some cream. And you go back and try to uncream the coffee. How do you remove cream from coffee? How do you remove this joogie boogie from what's happening to us? And everybody know it's racism, man. Let's cut to the chase. I'm 76 and this is my last dance. And I ain't got much longer to go and I ain't wasting no time. And I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not scared. I'm gonna speak my mind. And I'm 76. What else can they do to me? I ain't got much longer to go. You know, so I'm going to say whatever I need to say, and to hell with them, and Merry Christmas. Oh, yeah, one other thing. Dr. Hackett, we're coming down to Greenville, a group of us. We've been in touch with the police chief in Greenville, in the Carolinas, who want us to come down and do some gang intervention and gang and violence interruption kind of programs inside of there. And one of the bottom lines of all this is jobs. Jobs reduce crime. Jobs reduce all this violence in the street. And I got a program, Will, and I'll share it with you. We can create 10,000 to 100,000 jobs in this country within the next 6 to 9 months if we get the right resources. And we ain't got to kiss nobody's butt. They ain't got to come in and tell us what we can or can't do. And I'd like to be in touch with you, Dr. Hackett, because we're working with the police department down in Greenville. This tied into the first question, working with people in law enforcement. We've been working with judges. I never thought I'd work with a damn judge. Judge give me 15 years, I come in and—
I'm allergic to them.
You are, I break out in highs. I can't breathe when I see a judge. I get the shakes.
Give me your phone number, okay, brother, and I will reach out to you.
240-988-3548. And if you lose it, you always can call the FBI. They know how to reach me at any time.
I got me a roach. Thank you, man.
Dr. Jordan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We've developed a partnership. We're moving forward with opening up a new certification program sometime soon in the district for opioid addicted families. But how else are we able to, or what are some of the other steps we have to take to be able to move this agenda of using forensic peers and increasing the importance of peer work in the community?
It's kind of, if I had to give it a step-by-step process, one is now that you have a certification process that's in PC that'll allow people to be billable, then we're talking about a sustainability plan for the workforce. But in order to do that, you have to be trained first. And so the training that we're going to do in conjunction with Prestige and Jordan Peer Recovery, people can go through that training, which is approved by DCAPC, which is the local certification board, get their initial certification. So they get certified after their 60 hours of training, which is required. After they do those 60 hours of training, then they can go ahead and sit for the exam. Once they sit for the exam, pass the exam, and we'll even coach them on how to pass the exam. After they complete the exam and they are certified, they need to have 500 hours, clock hours, for them to volunteer or to either be working in a paid position, or they're able to do the hours under someone that is credentialed as a supervisor in that place, wherever they're volunteering or working. And the reason they're doing all of that is so that they can get their certification. Once they have their certification, or even when they're in the pathway to get their certification, we can train them with the specialty trainings that are around the sequential intercept model, around the other pieces that are involved in the curriculum for forensic peers and reentry peers. Once they have that, then they can actually take their lived experience along with all of what I just described as a formal process to be deployed. And I say the word deployed for a reason. I look at the peer recovery workforce as a necessary army. It is a necessary army in combating the outcomes that I spoke about and that we've all spoke about during this presentation. It's necessary in combating the opioid crisis. It's necessary in building a culturally responsive system. All of we need them to be deployed. And so again, that's the training and the certification pathway. On an individual level, people can reach out to Jordan Peer Recovery. You have our info, we'll reach out to you and register for a class. On a systematic level, the more organizations that will be willing to be like Prestige that can actually help with initiating groups and a format or a model for people to get their hours and to do their training, we'll be able to expand the workforce. And then finding opportunities and having those kind of conversations at a higher level with places that will start to look at the forensic peer recovery workforce as a vital, and not just vital, but a completely necessary part of reentry strategies. What we've been doing in the past doesn't work. And the reason we know it doesn't work is because of what recidivism numbers are. What we know it doesn't work because of relapse rates. We know it doesn't work because it wasn't built for Black and brown people to start with. It was built for people that were middle-aged white men anytime we have a conversation around evidence-based practices. So again, my scalability model, if you will, get the workforce trained, certified, deployed, and then making sure we're having systematic conversations at the higher level to make sure that organizations are willing to embrace what these peers offer.
I appreciate your response. We're at 1:55. So there's some housekeeping things I just need to do. First of all, I want to say to all the panelists, like, I love and support the work that you guys do. I do believe that as a group, we can make effective change and we can go as far as we decide. What I love about the peer support model is simply that, you know, we're doing the work and we're in control of how we heal, because there are times where the system doesn't work and it doesn't work very well. It's not responsive to the needs of the people who are really suffering. I was out doing outreach yesterday, and if you notice on your screen, you'll be seeing a webinar satisfaction survey. I'm going to ask that all the participants please complete your survey. Understand that if you have any additional questions, if you have questions that came up as a result of today's webinar, if you have questions as a result of the work that you currently do and you're stuck because you don't know how to get past that, you can always reach out to myself. I'm at Prestige Community Resources. I'm sure that Dr. Hackett, Dr. Jordan, Kevin Petty, Roach Brown, we all want to be engaged. We all want to be connected. That's a part of our mandate. And you know, the mandate doesn't come from government, it comes from within. You know, all you have to do is look at the passion by which people employ or people use in what they do, and it tells you who they are. And I love these folk on the panel because of the passion that they have. But I was out yesterday and we were doing an outreach, and a woman looked up, and the outreach worker had handed her some things, and you know, she wanted water, she wanted like a mask. You know, there were some basic things, Narcan, that we, you know, we distribute as part of harm reduction. And he handed her the flyer to the program. And she looked up and she threw it down and she says, "I don't want that." And she said, "I don't want that because you're a liar." And the outreach worker looked at me, and he didn't know what to do. And I said, "It's okay. It's okay." And she said, "I have been connected to 4 other mental health programs, and none of them have helped me. All y'all want to do is bill my insurance." And the reality is that has been her experience, and she's been entitled, right, to feel the way that she feels because she's been abused. And, you know, we as providers in the community, as people who provide who are architects for solutions to help our community, right, need to understand about cultural responsiveness, and that the people that we're engaging, you know, and Roach said it earlier, hurt people, like, they've been hurt. They've been abused. They've been taken advantage of. You know, to a lot of organizations, their only value is how much you can bill on their insurance. And that's just not acceptable. It's wrong. And if we are really going to heal, if we're really going to do the work, it requires action, not talking. And we have to be able to listen to the voices in the community of the people who've been bearing the brunt of COVID, opioid epidemic, racial pandemic, because it ain't gone nowhere. And as someone said earlier, it's only gotten worse. I want to thank everyone for attending. Please, please complete your survey, and we'll be looking forward for participation in our next webinar, which is Recovery Month, at the 4th Thursday of September. You guys take care. God bless.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.